Welcome back to another episode of Catching Feelings with John Sapanaro. Of course, that means I am your host, John Sapanaro. We're going to get into all things Mets today. The home opener happened. It was a win, which is good. There was some controversy about it. We're going to start right there. First of all, you can watch this either on my Instagram or on the Queens Baseball Convention channels on Twitch, Twitter, and Facebook. So wherever you're tuning in, keep those comments coming in as people log on. We want to hear from you. I've got a great guest today, and we are going to break it all down. But we have to start with the way the home opener ended. It is Michael Conforto leaning into that pitch. And here's the thing, guys, okay? I'm not giving this one back. As a Mets fan, I absolutely refuse to throw it back, okay? The way the Mets have lost, the Luis Castillo dropped pop-up, the quick pitch in the World Series game, I understand this is a little different, but the way the Mets have lost just in the last 5 or 10 years, you cannot give this one back. I appreciate Gary, Keith, and Ron for being honest about it. He should have been out. Conforto leaned into the pitch. He made no effort to get out of the way, and he should have been out. But you know what? He wasn't, and that's just how it is. And as a Mets fan, I can't see how you're angry about this. As a matter of fact, as a baseball fan, I can't really see how you're angry about this. The only way it's possible is if you are a fan of the Miami Marlins. In that case, you guys got screwed, and I'm kind of sorry about it. But other than that, it is what it is, guys. This is how baseball is sometimes. You want to get robot umpires. You want to change the rules and have everything just, be controlled by replay. It was a non-reviewable play by rule, so it is what it is, and that is it, okay? We got a win. It was important for us to get one. Maybe now we can move Jeff McNeil up in the lineup for some reason, but, we'll go with that. Listen, I'm going to bring in my guest. He's been in the studio. He's listening to this rant, and I want to get his opinion on it. He's a great comic. He's a friend of mine, somebody I've had the pleasure of working with before on the road. He was a cast member and a writer for Chelsea lately. He's got a great podcast of his own now called Cover to Cover, and we're going to bring in the man, Chris Franjola. Chris, how you doing, man?
Hi, John. How are you, buddy?
I was all fired up about this Conforto thing.
No, I completely understand. I mean, he 100% leaned into the pitch, and sometimes that's baseball, if you've ever watched Bad News Bears, the original with Walter Matthau and Tatum O'Neal, I believe they encourage a few of the players to just get hit by the pitch and get on. However you get on, get on. I know it's against the
win the game.
And also, Michael Conforto's been having some problems hitting with people in scoring position. And if he wound up fucking that up, that bases loaded, with 2 strikes on him one more time, I don't know what they would have done. So he had to kind of lean into that pitch and get something going.
He had no choice because he did get fooled. It was strike 3, and he got fooled on a good pitch. So you know what? You either just stand there and look at it, or
stick that elbow out. Yeah, right. And now with the pads and everything, I mean, I know the old school Keith Hernandez and stuff. There's no way you would have done that had you not had that elbow pad on. But it's great to just have the pad and stick it out there and win the game. I mean, he's going to get plunked on Saturday, right?
He has to. He absolutely has to get hit on Saturday. There's no way that's not going to happen. I mean, look, he did it. Everybody knows it was deliberate, and the Marlins were incensed. So he's going to get hit. And, hopefully they do the right thing, though, and just, hit him in the back or hit him in the ass. I don't want to see any head hunting. And if there is head hunting, if they throw up around his neck and his head, I don't want to hear people going, well, that's what you get because that's how baseball is, because that's
right.
It's not the same.
Yeah. No, it was, I mean, what are we, 4 games in? 4? 2 and 2?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, as a guy, John, who lives in Los Angeles, so I get to see a lot of Dodgers here. Just because that's who's in the paper and that's who's on the regular TV and stuff. So I'm surrounded by Dodger chat all the time. I want these Mets to be as dominant as like the Dodgers seem to be. And I thought this was going to be the year where we might be that dominant, and I'm not seeing it yet. I'm not saying we won't, but I'm just not seeing it yet.
I think, there were definitely some holes going into this season on the team. And I talked about it with a couple of my other guests before the season started, just in terms of the bullpen. Some of the depth in the lineup might not be as good as we thought it was. But I think the frustrating part is in a lot of the things that we thought were wrong with the team have reared their ugly heads just 4 games into the season.
Right.
And I think that's the frustrating part, is that we're like, oh, yeah, I think we're going to be better. There's some problems, but we're going to be better. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, here's the problems. Here's everything you thought that was going to be wrong with the team, wrong all at once. And that is sort of frustrating. So we both live out in Los Angeles, obviously, but you've been here longer than I have. So you've had to deal with the Dodger dominance for a little bit longer. What has that been like being so far removed from New York, being so far removed from, where you grew up, rooting for this team, and the team kind of being really a laughing stock outside of 2015 for like the last 5-10 years?
Yeah. I mean, it's, the good thing is when they become a laughing stock, around June or July, I just jump ship and start rooting for the Dodgers, which has been kind of convenient because they're always have been good and are going to be good. And I get we get to go to the Mets. Used to come here. I don't know if you were in LA yet, but they used to come twice to Dodger Stadium. They used to come in May and in August, but now it's just once. I think they come in August. So I mean, you'd go to Dodger Stadium. It'll probably be a little different now that the Dodgers are winning, but and it was all Met fans. I mean, the entire stadium was all Met fans during that trip out here in May and August. So, but it's I don't know. The Mets are tough. If you ever watched that movie Major League with Charlie Sheen,
yeah,
and in that movie they say in the beginning of the movie, your season will the first at bat is representative of the rest of your season, and if that's the case. I mean, us getting canceled for coronavirus for the first 3 games was just it was so Mets. It was just so Mets.
The worst part about that was that it was so Mets while also being not the Mets' fault at all. If that makes sense.
I know. I mean, I don't know if you're the same way as me. We were talking before, opening day. You and I were going back and forth via text, saying how excited we were for it to start. I had the day planned here. I got my MLB package. I was all ready to go. Food, and then I thought it was a joke. I saw somebody tweet that it's canceled. And I thought it was because it was April Fool's Day. Yeah. And I was like, this has got to be an April Fool's joke. And then sure enough, it's not. And I'm like, oh, you got to be kidding me. Of all the teams, this is the one that has to play the Nationals that have coronavirus issues. And here we are.
Well, dude, I felt exactly the same way. We didn't talk about this in particular, but like I had my whole day planned because the Yankees were on at 10 out here at 10 a.m. Then the Dodgers were on at 1. The Mets were on at 4. And I was like, oh, these are going to be 3 games I'm interested in. I had the MLB package. I was going to wake up, go to my favorite bagel shop in LA, get a bagel.
Yeah, that's the day. I know. I had the same plan. And I think that one was going to be on ESPN. It was going to be the national game of the week or whatever. ESPN, the DeGrom. I mean, it was also exciting. And then it didn't happen. And then, of course, DeGrom comes out and pitches another gem. And the bullpen, here we go again. I mean, this poor guy, I don't know if you were watching that game where they were throwing up some Cooperstown Hall of Fame statistics for pitchers who make it. And just the amount, basically in order to make the Hall of Fame as a pitcher, you have to have a certain amount of wins. But they'll have to make, they'll have to, for Jason DeGrom, they just can't go with that because it's just not going to happen. He's never going to get there. And I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, if you just look at his wins, you're like, this guy's not that great. And he'll go in the Hall of Fame and you'll be like, he went in the Hall of Fame only winning this many games. Like the casual baseball fan will look at his stats. I'm not talking the real stats that we all know and how dominant he's been. But they'll be like, I don't get it. And that's, I mean, he should sue the Mets and the bullpen for what they've done to him over the years. It's unbelievable.
It's so bad. And I can't believe that we're still talking about this. Like, you think at some point like that trend is going to change because teams are different, right? Like year in and year out. And, you get a guy like Lindor and you have a guy like Alonso turn the corner and McNeil hits well with runners in scoring position. So you figure, look, it was a 3-year anomaly, but eventually that stuff's going to even out. And it just seems like it never, ever does for Jacob deGrom. But I thought one of the best points that anybody's made about his potential Hall of Fame candidacy was Ron Darling on the broadcast opening day. He said, you have to start comparing him to a guy like Sandy Koufax, which sounds like heresy. Right. But that's really what his numbers are. He's going to be a guy who has put together X number of years of complete dominance where the wins are irrelevant. And so far, he's had 3 of those years. I mean, Koufax has 5 of them and is in the Hall of Fame. If DeGrom puts together 2 more years and wins another Cy Young, I think regardless of the wins, he's right there.
I mean, it's like I'm sounding like a Dodger fan here, but it's like Clayton Kershaw, the same thing. I mean, Kershaw has his issues with postseason stuff, but the numbers Kershaw has put together year after year, it's just unbelievable. And to have a pitcher that dominant as we do now on our staff is just so exciting. I mean, as much as we Met fans love Tom Seaver and we love our some of our even Ron Darling and those guys. Jason DeGrom is just better than Tom Seaver. It's just a different era. He's just a better pitcher, I think, than Tom Seaver.
I think some people who watch this might feel differently about that.
That's fine. Bring it on. I can handle it.
I know you can, and I don't necessarily disagree with you. But if I say something like that, people are like, "Oh, John, it's because you're in your 30s. You never saw the guy. You don't." But I do think baseball is harder now. I do think that guys are better athletes now. Yeah. And I think that that's probably where your point comes from, right?
Yes, it is. And of course, I was just watching something. I forgot what I was watching, but you can't compare the eras, it's just different. I mean, things are just different. But if you watch like I do, if you ever, sit home and YouTube the 1986 World Series or even 88, the playoff. I mean, the size of these guys it's almost like you're watching a Little League game to see, Rafael Santana at shorts. Like this, Rafael Santana wouldn't be able to play in a Little League team now. I mean, the guy was 140 pounds, whatever he was, and, couldn't hit a ball past the second baseman. But that's what shortstops used to be. Now shortstops are 6'6". They hit 35 home runs. I mean, it's unheard of.
I love when they do that now. They're like, "Oh, I think this guy might be able to stick at shortstop. He's a little bit big." I'm like, man, like that was a conversation like in 1992.
Right.
We're 25 years removed from anything like that being even a topic that you can approach.
Yeah, it's amazing how the size of these guys has changed. It's a new game, and I mean some of the things that happen in the game today, just the lack of bunting. I don't know. There was a bunt the other night where the guy just bunted it, popped it up to the pitcher. And I'm like, how the fuck can you not bunt a ball? I feel like that's the first thing you learn is to bunt.
Do you feel like a bunting is because a couple of the other guys I've had on so far have been more of the old school mentality fans.
Yeah.
They say, hey, you got to be able to beat the shift and
Don't even get me started on the shift, John. I can't. I could hit the ball down the third base line.
So you do feel that way that guys need to be able to beat the shift. We shouldn't outlaw the shift.
No. You need to be able to beat the shift. And if you can't beat the shift, I don't know. You're a Major League Baseball player making millions of dollars. You can't find a way to poke that ball down the third base line or first base line, whichever way the shift is going. I mean, now looking at this shift sometimes it's almost laughable. Sometimes I watch the game with like friends who don't really know baseball, and they're like, why is there nobody playing third base? I'm like, oh, there is. They're just standing on second base right now.
Yeah, there's a third baseman. The third baseman's playing second. The second baseman's playing rover. The shortstop is kind of playing shortstop, but not really. Yeah, it does get a little crazy. Since we're on the topic of some of that old school versus new school stuff, they are bringing back the black jerseys, and I know that this has been a controversy for a lot of people. Some people love the black jerseys. Some people hate them. How do you feel about the black jerseys coming back?
I'll say this. I don't love them as much as everybody seems to love them. But I don't hate them either. I think they're okay. I mean, I'm reading so much about it, and Steve Cohen's commenting on it, when and how they're going to bring them back. I'm like, I think we have larger problems than the color of the jersey right now. So I'm not all that concerned with them, but sure, bring them back. I like the look.
That's how I feel. Like, and when one of my other guests was like, you're young, you probably love the black jersey. I was like, honestly, when the black jerseys were out, I didn't really like them because I thought they used them too much. I thought they incorporated black into the color scheme and kind of took the blue away, and it didn't feel like the Mets. But now, as a kind of throwback and a harkening back to the Piazza, Ventura, Edgardo Alfonso days, if they want to do it, like the idea that they're floating out is like Friday night blackouts. So, Friday night home games, they'll wear the black jerseys. To me, I think that's cool. So I like them more now than I ever liked them conceptually when they first had them.
I agree. I agree with you on the fact that the blue and the orange was kind of gone there for a little while, and it didn't feel very Mets. So as much as sometimes when I'm wearing the hat, the blue is a little much sometimes. It's a little bright. You know what I mean? When you're just on a Tuesday afternoon walking down Ventura Boulevard in Los Angeles, sometimes that blue could be a little much.
Yeah, well, and it's very, it's essentially Dodger blue anyway, and then you kind of have that whole thing. So it's nice to kind of have the black hat is better for fashion and everyday use. I will go with you on that for sure.
Can I ask you a question, John, as a guy who's moved to Los Angeles? Are you, and this is going to get people riled up, are you a Yankee hater or are you a Met fan? And because I feel there's two schools here. You either have to be like sometimes I will wear a Yankee hat just because I have the hat of every stadium I've ever been to. If I go to the stadium, I buy the hat, and I have a lot of hats. I have Cubs hats, I have Cardinals hats, and I wear them, all the time, taking nothing away from my love of the New York Mets. But however, I'll wear Yankee hats sometimes. And I don't hate the Yankees. I never really have. I've always liked some of their players. Even before we did interleague stuff, why would I hate the Yankees? They never. I don't love them like I love the Mets, but we didn't play each other unless it got to the point where we were in the World Series. They don't. But I have friends who, they'll see me wear a Yankee hat and they'll be like, "What are you?" They can't get over it. And
So I used to hate them when I was younger, but I think it was because I had a real chip on my shoulder about the fact that, when I was growing up and loving baseball for the first time in the mid-90s, the Yankees were great and the Mets were terrible. So I think that's really where my hatred of the Yankees came from. I was jealous. As I've gotten older and a little bit more mature, I sort of feel the way that you do. Now, I wouldn't wear Yankees stuff, but I don't hate the Yankees. I just look at them as they're another team. They're over there. They do their thing and we do our thing, and that's it. And so, because I do agree with you from a fashion and a memories standpoint too. Like when I go to certain places, like I will buy an item, or sometimes you work at a venue and they will give you something, and it's like I'm not going to not wear it. I did something. I'm a Nets fan. I did something for the Utah Jazz, over at their venue a couple years ago, and they gave me this great Utah Jazz sweatshirt. Like, I'm not going to wear it. It's really nice. It's really comfortable. It looks cool. And it reminds me of something that I went and did over there. So like, I'm not going to not wear it.
Yeah. No, one of the great things about being a road comic is you do have the opportunity, if you're in a city and the team happens to be there on a Saturday afternoon, you have the opportunity to go to the stadium. And I've done it. I've gone to many stadiums. And while there, if I'm in Chicago, I'm going to Wrigley Field and I'm wearing a Cubs hat. And I take a lot of shit for it, but that's just I try to mix in with the city I'm in. I'm not one of those dudes who'll go to the stadium and root hard against the other team. I feel like, I don't know, this is going to sound, it's a little disrespectful is the wrong word, but for lack of a better one, I'll use it. It's a little disrespectful to go in there and really shit on the team that when you're in their stadium. You know what I mean? I feel like that's a little, but I know Philly loves to do it. We love to do it in New York. We love to do it in, you can't do it at Dodger Stadium. They'll fucking kill you in the parking lot. But,
I actually agree with you. The only time I'll ever go to a place and root for the visiting team is if they're playing the Mets. Like, if I go to a Mets-Dodgers game, I'm rooting for the Mets, obviously, and I'm not going to make any bones about it, but that's okay. If I go to a Cubs Cincinnati Reds game at Wrigley, I mean, like, I'm not rooting for the Cubs, but like, I'm not going to root against the Cubs. Like, I'd rather
Right.
just see a good baseball game. But like, if the Cubs win, it'll be better for everybody. And my biggest takeaway from that was actually in another sport. I went to a Cleveland Browns game when they were playing the Giants on Monday Night Football the year after the Giants won one of their Super Bowls. And I think it was the first one against the Pats. The Giants were coming in undefeated. They were riding this wave. They were like 4-0. They go to Cleveland. Cleveland's been terrible for 20 years. Cleveland beats them. It was like Cleveland won the Super Bowl. Now, I, like you, am a Jets fan, so I was not rooting for the Giants. I was just happy to be in Cleveland. And so after they won, it was like the party that ensued on this Monday night for all the, and like they have a row of bars that lead up to their stadium. And it was like the greatest experience ever. I wound up going out and like getting drunk with a bunch of Cleveland Browns fans. It was fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I love cities like Cleveland and cities that are just passionate about. I'll say this: even as much as I like Los Angeles and I don't hate the Dodgers, stuff like that, we're just not that town. We're not I mean, if you go to Dodger Stadium, the fans are rabid and they love the Dodgers, but we're not. The whole city doesn't live or die by the Dodgers. But in the case of Cleveland and Chicago and places like that, I love those type of cities that are just all about their teams. And
I actually agree with you there. And I think that's one of the things, like, you and I are both from New York and we both now live in Los Angeles, and they're two cities that have, I'm not dumping on any other place, but there's a lot of stuff to do in New York and there's a lot of stuff to do in LA that, you don't have to get caught up in sports. And so we also have two of everything, especially in New York. You're a Mets fan or a Yankees fan, you're a Giants or a Jets, you're an Islanders or a Rangers. There's so many teams to choose from. So when you have a city like Boston or Philly, where the entire city they get around one team and it's theirs and they're so protective of it. Sometimes I'm a little envious because we're good fans in New York, but it's not the same when you have other options for entertainment and you have other teams that you can root for. Like some of my best friends are Yankee fans and we're never going to see eye to eye. And it's not the same as like, the entire city getting together to go watch, the Red Sox in the playoffs at a bar that's packed with people. And like maybe Ben Affleck shows up,
Yeah. No, why do you feel, I think you and I, why do you feel we've always chosen the losers in those teams you just mentioned, like the Jets and the Mets? I don't know exactly where you're from in New York. Are you a Long Island guy?
I guess kind of sort of technically because I'm from Brooklyn and, but not out east.
Right. Yeah. I always thought it was a Long Island thing because, back in the old days, they all used to play at Shea Stadium. So I felt like that was the reason why I gravitated toward them instead of the teams that were playing, weren't playing at Shea. But it's, we were never on the winning side. That could change.
Yeah, for me, one of them makes sense and the other one kind of doesn't, with as far as the Mets and the Jets go. So, and those are my two. Anybody who knows me really well, those are the two highest levels of fandom. Like I love baseball first, football's like a real close 1A, and then it's kind of everything else. So. I don't live I'm a Nets fan. I don't live and die by it. I'm a Rangers fan. I don't live and die by that. But as far as baseball goes, my grandfather was an old Brooklyn Dodgers fan. And then when they moved, he was like, look, I'm from a time when there were three teams in New York. You loved one and you hated the other two. So when the Dodgers left in the 50s, he tried to follow the games, but really couldn't from the other coast. Back in the 50s, it was like impossible. And he was like, I couldn't root for the Yankees. I couldn't bring myself to do it. So finally, when the Mets became a team, he was like, okay, I'm a Mets fan. And I learned a lot about baseball from my grandfather. And I just like everybody in my family are really Mets fans. As far as the Jets go, I don't know how it happened because everybody in my family is a Giants fan. And I just went.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Jets was just like a Mark Gastineau, like during that era when it was the sack exchange and Joe Klecko and stuff. I got into it, and even before that, I maybe Joe Namath. I don't know, but I'm with you though. I'm the same way. Mets. It's a little much sometimes. My wife is just like, "Are you going to watch because it's 162 games and I can get them all on the MLB package, and they're all 4 hours. And then midway through the season, you're like, have I seriously sat and watched 50 4-hour games? Like, that's a lot of time spent in front of the television.
It is, and because I'm like you, I will watch them as long as I'm not doing anything else that runs up against it. So like if I've got a gig, obviously I'm going to go to the gig, but even if it's something personal, like if I have a softball game, I'm going to go play softball. I'm not going to not, break my commitment to stay home and watch the Mets. But if I'm home, I'm going to watch the Mets. If I'm at the hotel, I'm going to watch the Mets. Like that's how I'm going to spend the free time watching the game. And it is kind of crazy because you sit there and you're like midway through, you look back, you're like, I've been watching baseball just like every day, all day. It feels like all day.
Did you hate last year's shortened season? I didn't hate it. I like the fact that a lot, there was a lot more put on every game. And sometimes this 162, I've always felt it was a little long, but now having seen that shortened season last year, I really feel it's a little long. But I wouldn't change it, of course, but it didn't kill me that we had a season that all of a sudden we're like, oh, every game counts, and we're in the playoffs. And I like that expanded playoff thing. I thought they were actually going to adopt that. I'm surprised they didn't. And that was fun. It made it a lot more. Give you a little more of a rooting interest in some teams.
I don't know how I felt about it because I definitely hated it less than I thought I would. Conceptually, when they first said it, I was like 60 games. It's too little. It's not enough baseball. It's not going to be representative. But I think there was something to what you said about how the games mattered so much. Every single game, like the stakes felt so high each and every single time. And I've only ever lived through the 162. Like I wasn't around for the 154 or whatever they came from before that. So, it's hard to compare it, but I could see them getting down to around 150.
But if you did 150, where do you start the season? Do you just start it later in April? Because I know a lot of guys hate this. You could play in Citi Field in April and it's 35 degrees. So that could be an issue when it comes to muscles and things like that. Or how do you take those games away? Do you start in May?
Look, I don't want baseball to start any later because I like watching it.
Me too. I'm the same way.
Right? Like I don't really want to cut the season back, but I think that would make the most sense is to start in May because, like you said, there's so many northern cities and East Coast cities that are just brutal. The Detroit Tigers were playing in a blizzard on opening day, and it looks cool, but like I wouldn't want to be there playing, watching anything. And like I've gone to games alone. Like I've gone to Mets games alone in the rain on a Tuesday in April. Like that's how much like I will go if I have the tickets, but like I don't want to. I'd rather just be home.
Yeah, it's rough. You go to a night game in April, it gets rough, and it's like being at a football game in Cleveland. It can get cold out there at Citi Field.
It's absolutely brutal, man. I think people lose sight of that sometimes because, especially back east, because you'll look at it and you'll get like those first warm days. Out here, the temperature drops at night, but people know like that's the ebbs and flows of living in Southern California, and it's like it's going to get cooler at night. Even in the middle of the summer, sometimes you dress for that cool weather. And but in New York, it's like people get all gassed up. They're like, oh, it was 65 degrees today. I'm going to the Mets game. I'm wearing a t-shirt. And all of a sudden it's like, dude, it's 35 at night. What are you doing wearing that t-shirt? You're crazy.
And then the players, I would imagine it's got to be rough hitting, in that type of weather. So, and you could feel the guys, some guys just can't. And all of a sudden their numbers will start going up around June. They'll start to put things together. And I hear, Keith and Ron, and they'll always say that. They'll always go, this is basically in April and May. It's tough to put up big numbers,
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's one of the things I want to ask you, because we kind of went off on this tangent, is about shortening the games in general. That's what everybody wants to do now. Major League Baseball is like, we got to shorten the games. We got to shorten the games. And I think that they keep looking for love in all the wrong places. I think the way that they're trying to shorten the games don't actually make sense. So they have this extra inning rule, and it's like, okay, the extra inning rule.
I hate the guy in second.
It's the worst.
It's the worst.
But it's like that prevents the games from going 20 innings. Okay, I get that. But it doesn't actually shorten the game because you're already in extra innings. So it doesn't shorten the 9-inning game. Same thing with the 3-batter minimum for relief pitchers. I don't think that shortens the game in a meaningful way. I think it changes baseball more than it actually shortens it. So I think some of the other stuff, like the pitch clock idea, telling batters that they can't step out. It's like, hey, look, you step out, but I'm not granting you time. The pitcher throws it, he throws it. If it's a strike and you're not in the box, it's a strike.
Right.
I think that quickens the game up. How do you feel about some of those rules?
Well, it's interesting. I feel this way about baseball. Either you're a fan or you're not. I don't think shortening the game. I know a lot of the purpose of shortening the game is to, people's attention spans are just not what they used to be in anything. And I think that they want to just gain more fans by shortening the game. And I don't know if that's necessarily going to happen. There's going to be some people who like baseball for whatever reason. There's going to be some people who like basketball because it moves quicker and everything like that. So short, you know what I mean? Baseball in some ways might be an old man's sport. And I'm okay with that. I don't know if we're going to get a young crowd to watch baseball games. I like it, once again, going back to, I'll watch games with friends who are not really, baseball fans. And 3 hours later, I'll be like, this game's still going on? I'm like, yeah, it's still going on. It's only the 6th inning. So
this game is going to be on for a lot longer.
Yeah.
You have no idea how much longer this game is going to continue.
Yeah. So it's, I don't know. I just don't know if it's going to be that game for people. It's never going to be 2 hours. No matter what you do, it's just not going to be.
Yeah. I agree with that too. I think that it's just as simple as you're either a baseball fan or you're not, and it's nuanced. I think that there's things that they can do to get more people to be baseball fans from an earlier age, but I don't think trying to grab somebody who's 40 years old that doesn't like baseball by saying like, oh, look, the games are no longer 4 hours because we put a runner on second base. Yeah. It's like, no, dude, that's like that guy was never going to watch it anyway.
Right. Exactly.
I think,
and like you said, by the time you get to that guy being on second base, the game's already been 4 hours. You're in the 10th inning at this point. It's been 4 hours.
Exactly. And I think some of the things that they do, and they're starting to move away from it a little bit now, but I've always had a problem with them vilifying the guy who flips the bat and the guy who gets pumped up. It's like, man, that's what kids like. Kids like that kind of energy. And it's like, if you anyone, who wouldn't do that, Chris? You would do that. If you hit a big home run, you saw Jeff McNeil's bat flip. And Jeff McNeil's one of those guys, he's a little bit flashier than you would think, just by seeing him. But he's one of those guys, he looks like an old school baseball guy, and he threw that bat into the third row.
I've always said this, John. The characters of the game, I'm going back to the days when in the 70s, when you had these Al Roboski and I don't know if you remember a guy named, you're too young to remember a guy named Mark Fidrich, a crazy Detroit Tiger pitcher who would talk to the baseball and wander around the mound. And you encourage these characters of the game. The Mets had a lot of them. There was a lot of them. And even in any sport, football, basketball, all of the sports, the characters of the game were part of the fun of watching baseball games. Some of these Terry Bradshaw, some wild people. And now, I agree with you. It's like, no. We want the wackos. We want Manny Ramirez. We want those guys who are just a bit odd. They're fun to watch. It's even better if they're good. I love the bat flip. I love all that stuff. That's what this game's supposed to be, dramatic and fun.
Yeah.
And showy and show-offs and staring down of batters and that's all part of the fun of it.
I agree completely. And I think it does make it a lot less fun when people are like, that's not how you play. It's the unwritten rules of baseball. And it's like, look, if you want, because we've got one of those guys on our team. We have DeGrom, who's not showy. He just does what he does. He goes out there, he lives his life, he pitches great, and then he goes back into the dugout and you would have never known he pitched at all. And that's okay too. I don't think everybody needs to be flashy. I just think the old school guys, whether they're older actually or they just have an old school mentality, need to just worry about it themselves. If you're old school and you want to take your at-bats and then go into the dugout, that's fine. But like, don't get mad at the guy that pumps his fist or flips the bat. Like, let him do him and you do you, and that's it.
I totally agree. Yeah, I'm all. I mean, and now that you're saying it, I'm thinking back to Roger Clemens throwing the broken bat. Did he throw it at Piazza? Did he not? I mean, but watching that game, it was just so exciting during that moment when, I mean, I don't know if you remember that. Piazza's walking down the first baseline. Clemens picks up a piece of broken bat and throws it. And it's Clemens. Clemens was just wild. The guy, whether it was steroids or whatever it was that was driving him insane, it was fun to watch.
Yeah, and those kinds of things need to be more in the game, and I think that's also how you, not necessarily throwing the bat at somebody, but you know what I mean, like that.
But but like that kind of drama created in A-Rod pulling the ball out of the guy's mitt going down the first base line. This kind of stuff it creates drama when if you got casual fans watching the game, like, oh shit. This is fun. What happened? They threw the bat at the guy, pulled the ball out of his hand. Pedro Martinez threw Don Zimmer on the ground. Like, those are the kind of things that are fun to watch.
I agree with you completely. I think that's when you get the real fun of the game, and that's how you make the game more appealing on a wider base. I don't think you change the game for people who were never going to be baseball fans.
No, that's what I let the game be the game.
No, yeah, because they're not gonna be. I even had this conversation years ago. This had to be maybe 10 years ago now with an ex-girlfriend of mine, and she liked football. She was never into baseball, and at the time we were living together, so I was watching a lot of it. And she was like, "Well, I want to know what this is about." And I was like, "Well, to be honest with you, the more you understand about baseball, the more interesting and action-packed it actually is, because it moves slowly, but especially in a big game." There's so much in every pitch. There's so much nuance. If you're watching a World Series game, every pitch matters. I mean, we saw it when the Mets played the Royals. And that game swung on singular pitches and at-bats. And if you can follow that, it's a very intense, very dramatic game. If
nothing
you don't
like
know
it.
The rules,
there's nothing. Nothing like postseason baseball. It just nothing like it. And you could take. And I love when postseason football and all that. But just nothing like postseason baseball. It's just, for me, I cannot wait to get to those fall games. And even if the Mets aren't in it, I still just can't wait. Like that game, even in that shortened season last year, that one game with the Rays and the Dodgers where the guy slid into home plate. And, it was one of the best baseball games I've ever seen. And I didn't have a rooting interest in either team.
Yeah. I even remember the Ruben Tejada play with Chase Utley and the whole Dodgers thing. Like, man,
don't even get me started on that one, John. I know people are going to hate me for this too. I'm all for Chase Utley in that play. That is hard-nosed, old-school baseball. If you're in the way, I got to break up this double play. I have to break it up. I didn't mean to break. Of course, Chase Utley didn't mean to break the guy's leg, but that's the way you play baseball. You don't let them get the double play. You do whatever you can to knock that guy out.
The only problem that I ever had with it was that he did slide wide and missed the bag entirely. I don't think he was trying to break his leg, but he was trying to make contact with him. And that kind of goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning with the whole Conforto thing. Look, Conforto broke the rules and didn't get called for it. Chase Utley broke the rules and didn't get called for it. The rule is that you have to be able to reach the base if you slide for the base, and he didn't. And, and the end result was Ruben Tejada got his leg broken. So was it a dirty play? In the context of he went out of his way to hit him, I guess, kind of, but like he wasn't trying to break his leg. But ever since that Buster Posey play where Buster Posey gets hurt, somebody collides with him, they're like, we can't have this. We can't have stars getting hurt. And it's like, man, sometimes stars get hurt. Pete Rose destroyed Ray Fosse's career in that All-Star game. I'm not saying that that's the best case scenario, but it's like, again, that's baseball. You have to, if you're a catcher, the thing is, if you're a catcher, you've got a suit of armor on. You're blocking the plate. Odds are, if the guy who's running into you, like, he's going to get hurt more than likely. You're there. You're stationary. You can brace for it, and you're wearing armor. The guy running into you, I wouldn't run into that. I never, all the years I played baseball in high school and in college, I would never run into a guy wearing a full.
Honestly, it came up in game opening day of the Met when that play at the plate where I think he was afraid to get in front of that ball, and that's why it went past him, and they lost that game.
Yeah, they try to legislate out like the blocking of the plate in a weird way. And I guess catchers have gotten used to it now because it's been several years. But like, I remember at first people were like, they didn't know what to do because they're like, well, what if the throw takes me to block the plate? And it's like, well, you got to catch the ball. First of all, let's start there. You got to catch the ball and be in a position to make the tag. But it's almost like they've made it unnatural for the catchers. Like, so they're standing there and they're like, well, I don't want to block it, so I got to watch my footwork, and I don't know, like, should I step up, but then I have to go back to tag? What if the throw is off? It's just like, it's another thing that catchers shouldn't have to worry about when they're already in the heat of it.
What does Jerry Grody think of all this?
Jerry Grody would stab someone.
Yeah, right.
So let me ask you this. I mentioned it real quick at the beginning, but this is a hill that I am prepared to die on. So I want to know how you feel about it. I know it worked out yesterday because he came up and he tied the game. Jeff McNeil batting 7th is blasphemy to me.
Yeah.
I think he's the best hitter on the team aside from Lindor, and you don't bat your best hitter 7th. No.
Yeah. They're making some odd moves. This manager is making some strange moves, but it
worked. It worked out, right? Like he came up in a spot where it was beneficial, and he was the right guy up. So I'm not a huge Brandon Nimmo fan. I don't know how you feel about him. I think he's good. I think he gets kind of boosted up because he's all smiley, hustle, and people, I get his on-base percentage is legitimate. He is. He gets on base at like, a 40% clip, and that's real. But I just think that McNeil is a better choice getting more at-bats. Not necessarily hitting leadoff, although that's where I would hit him. But, getting more at-bats up at the top of the lineup, I think he gets a little wasted 7th in the order, especially when you have guys like, Jonathan Villar and Luis Guillorme hitting before him. That's not right.
Yeah. So who do you bat 7th?
So in my ideal lineup, I guess I would put McNeil 1, then Lindor, then Conforto, Alonso, Smith. So that takes you through 5. JD Davis, 6, and then either McCann or Nimmo, 7, 8, and flip-flop them.
I have no problem with that. That's a good lineup. Yeah. That's good. I like that lineup.
And the thing is, like, McNeil doesn't get on base in terms of taking the walks with regularity the way that Nimmo does, but because he hits 300, 310, 320, and he gets hit by pitches and he isn't afraid to take walks here and there, his on-base percentage is going to be close to Nimmo's. It's not like he has a 240 on base.
Right. And why are we not playing Dom Smith every pitch every day? Please. Yeah. I mean, we need more Dom Smith.
That drove me nuts, and that was part of it on the opening day lineup. It was like, of the lefties that we have, Nimmo is probably the weakest going up against left-handed pitchers.
Yeah.
Nimmo's in the lineup, but Dom Smith isn't, when Dom Smith has a better approach. And then you're not going to bat Nimmo leadoff because you don't want his bat, up at the top against the lefty. Fine. But then you don't even hit McNeil up there. You hit Kevin Pillar leadoff? No.
Yeah. I don't know.
It ruins the depth that we have, because we do have, probably for the first time in, I don't know. I mean, the Wilpons always ignored depth because you had to spend money on, a good bench player costing $5 million a year. And they're like, nah, no thanks. So we never really had this kind of depth. But when you do things like that in the everyday lineup, I think it kind of ruins the depth that you do have because you've made curious choices to start.
Yeah, I agree. Can I ask you a question? Speaking of the Wilpons?
Yes, of course.
What has become of Giannis Cespedes? Is he still a Met, or is he not a Met anymore?
No, his contract was up at the end of last year, and when he opted out in the middle of the season, like basically his that's it. He forfeited the rest of his pay for the year. He was free to do whatever, and he was a free agent. He tried out for a bunch of teams, and a lot of scouts went down and said he looked good, but he never got a job. And I think it's because he left. I think you know, he kind of screwed the Mets like 2 separate times. Because I don't think anybody who opted out because of COVID was making the wrong choice or should be vilified for it, because that's your personal choice. It's health, whatever. But Cespedes clearly, like, he was planning on playing, and then he played and he was terrible. And he was like, I'm gonna opt out. I'm gonna opt out. And then he was at like the Queens Center Mall or like Manhasset or something.
He was at a club that night or something. Yeah.
So, you know,
but that's what I always thought about the Wilpons. I know people love to hate on the Wilpons, and I do too. But they just made some moves that just didn't work out. You know, they spent the money on Cespedes. It didn't work. They spent the money on some other Jason Bay. I think that was the Wilpons back then during the Jason Bay days.
It was.
And you know, that was a big get at the time, Jason Bay. But you know, the guy runs into the wall, and that's it. So we've always, like, I hope this is not a Lindor situation, because every time we've gotten the big guy, it just didn't work. You know what I mean? I could go on for days about the Mo Vaughns and you know, it's on and on and on and on. The Robbie Alomars, they just didn't work. They never worked for us getting the big guy.
I agree with you, but I disagree with you at the same time. And actually, we just got a comment from the Queens Baseball Convention, which hosts this show on Facebook. And they said they would spend money, but never spent money for the final piece.
That's a good point.
That's where I was going to go with it, is that, you know, a lot of times these superstars didn't work out because they weren't necessarily superstars. Like that Jason Bay year, look, he was real good with Boston. He went to Boston. He filled Manny Ramirez's shoes. Nobody thought he was going to be that kind of player. But the guy to get that offseason was Matt Holliday. And the Mets were like, Holliday's too expensive. Let's get Bay. Holliday goes on and has, you know, an 8-year run where he's still a really good ball player. Jason Bay has, you know, I think 15 home runs in 4 seasons with the Mets or something stupid like that. So I think it was always the wrong guy, or, you know, not spending enough money and really allocating the resources. Because even when pre-Madoff, when they were getting all that Madoff money in and actually spending the money, they were always in the top 5 to 3 in payroll. Yeah. They would shortchange the big players. It was always like, oh, Vladimir Guerrero, he wants $75 million. We offered him $50. And it's like, well, dude, you're not going to get him for $25 million less.
Right.
You know, when A-Rod signed with Texas, they were like, he wants an office at Shea Stadium. The guy's the best player in the world. Give him a wing of Shea Stadium if that's what he wants. You know? Right. So to me, sometimes they got a bad rep, but sometimes they still didn't do what they needed to do. And then once the money dried up, once the Madoff situation, they were always just trying to, like, how can we put these pieces together to just be okay?
Right. How quickly, I mean, I know it's not panic time yet, 2-2 and whatever, but when do we start coming for Steve Cohen? What has to happen before, and you know, Mets fans, we will turn on a dime. And right now we all love him, but how soon, if we don't start, you know, we're not 12-2 in the next 3 weeks, does it start? The chance of get this guy out of here. Who's next? Should have been A-Rod and J-Lo, you know.
You know, I think he's going to get a long rope. I don't think the team will get a long rope. I think the owner will, because I think everyone was so tired of the Wilpons ultimately. And we went from having these cheap owners to having the richest owner in the league, who also has shown himself not to be cheap, especially because he got the Lindor deal done.
But he didn't get the other deal done. That's you know, he didn't get the pitcher that the Dodgers got.
I know.
Shit. Yeah. But so that in a way, that's saying what they just said. Did we get the final piece? That we didn't get JT Realmuto. So you know, he should have gotten 2. He should have gotten Lindor. If you really wanted to show your fucking, I got money and I'm here to play, you should have gotten either that, what's his name? The pitcher the Dodgers got.
Trevor Bauer.
You should have gotten Realmuto and Lindor, or Bauer and Lindor.
Yeah. It's weird with both of those guys because I wanted Real Muto a lot, and I had warmed to the idea of Bauer just because I think he's a good pitcher. I think he's a little bit of a head case. He's like a little too much on Twitter and like some of the weird things he does. It's just like, I think New York, I don't care about it, but I think New York would have been like, if he has 2 bad starts in a row, the New York fans would be like, get off Twitter and pitch,
Yeah,
that kind of thing. But we offered Bauer more money over the course of the contract. He wound up getting slightly more per year with the Dodgers. I think he used us to get a better deal from them. So he's from Southern California, and I think that was the deal. I think he just looked at the Mets offer, went back to the Dodgers and said, hey, can you do this? And they were like, sure. And then next thing you know, he's with the Dodgers. And Real Muto, I think, was sort of similar because apparently they offered him like a $125 million contract right at the beginning of free agency. And he was trying to get more, and he wasn't prepared to take that offer. And so that's when they pivoted to McCann, because they were afraid that if McCann signed elsewhere, that Real Muto was going to come back to them and go, okay, you offered me 125. Well, I want 250. And what were they going to do? There was no other catchers. So, it is a little different there. In terms of the owner's willingness. But I do think if the team gets off to a bad start, I think it's going to be, people will start to, regardless of the owner, it's going to be a lot of same old Mets if we're like, 5-15 or something like that. And actually, Queens Baseball Convention said going 4-10 would stall, maybe chase him off Twitter again.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah, he's right. Oh, if John, if we go 4-10, because this is just a year we thought was going to be our year, and I know I read things that there, as you were saying earlier in this show, there's holes. There were holes, but I was choosing to ignore some of them, thinking that we could. But like you said, we saw the holes early, and I just hope they don't get bigger.
Well, let me ask you this. So one of the things that you text me, I think it was during the Philadelphia series, you just text me and you were like, I know it's early, but this isn't a playoff team.
It's not.
I agree
with you. Now.
I agree. What's your biggest concern? So I know you said you want to ignore the holes, but if you had to lean in and not ignore them and just like shine a light on it, what's your biggest concern today about the team?
My biggest concern is Noah Syndergaard is not going to be the pitcher we think Noah Syndergaard is. And if and when he comes back in May or June, I think June, they're saying perhaps, I just don't think Syndergaard is as dominant as we want him to be. Just like when it was Harvey and Syndergaard and DeGrom, and I was like, I don't know. We keep talking about this being the most dominant, but it just never happened. And I just don't see Syndergaard being that guy. That's why we needed Trevor Bauer.
I do agree with you there. I think Syndergaard is potentially an issue because he's never been as dominant as his stuff would say that he would be.
And he's injury prone.
Yeah, and he has been, and when you look at a guy like DeGrom, and it's really not the truth anymore, because DeGrom has done something that no pitcher has ever really done, in that his velocity is getting higher every year over the last few years, and his stuff is now right there with Syndergaard. But if you go back 5 years ago, you would say Syndergaard had the best stuff of everybody, but wasn't necessarily the best pitcher. And so I think that is definitely a cause for concern. Queens Baseball Convention saying Syndergaard should have been traded in 2016.
I'm all about this guy. He's making some good points.
He doesn't love Syndergaard. I know that.
Yeah. Well, so that's my concern. My concern is I don't know if David Peterson's our number 3. Is that a playoff number 3 guy? Once again, I go back to the Dodgers. If you look at that rotation, you're like, this Padres. You're like, wow, it just keeps getting better. It's brutal if you have to face these, 4 guys in a short series, whatever. And I don't know if we have that.
That was my biggest reason for wanting to sign Bauer and forgetting about whatever else. Screw it, man. Because I think if you have DeGrom and you have Bauer, and then you have a guy like Carrasco's your 3, all of a sudden Stroman is your 4, Syndergaard coming off of injury is your 5. Now that's a deep rotation, because
that's a deep rotation. However, agree. But that's also putting a lot that if Syndergaard is Syndergaard and he comes back, so I don't know. I haven't seen it from Syndergaard yet. Other than listen, the Thor thing was fun, and the hair, and some of the pitching, some of the, it's great to watch him, but it just, I'm not getting it. He's not Trevor Bauer.
He's not. He's definitely not. I mean, he hasn't pitched to his potential for sure. 100%. And for me, the biggest concern, and maybe it's a little bit because of history, because Sandy has been real bad at this historically, is the bullpen. I think he has ignored the bullpen or been incapable of building a bullpen. This year, there was no excuse. He had the money to build whatever bullpen he wanted. Now, some guys I understand didn't take it. Brad Hand was the perfect fit, but it seemed like he just didn't want to pitch in New York. And look, if you don't want to pitch in New York or LA or Boston or Chicago, if you don't want to pitch in a market like that, then we don't want you. So that's fine. But there were other guys like Liam Hendricks and Rosenthal and, really good pitchers, even Shane Green, who's still a free agent. It's like, go get one of these guys, man. I'm tired of seeing Jeurys Familia and Robert Gesellman outside of that one run.
No. I know. Gesellman. Oh, please, no. Yeah.
Oh, I know. He's so bad, dude. Gesellman is horrendous. He had that one stretch when him and Lugo first came up and pitched down that stretch as starters when they were rookies. Fine. And look, Lugo's real good when he comes back from injury. Hopefully he's healthy the rest of the year, whatever. But Gesellman is, brutal. He's my least favorite Met for sure.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one.
He's so horrendous. And like I used my least favorite Met forever was Lucas Duda, because I thought Duda was like
I mean that's all we had for a little while though. And then these guys, just Lucas Duda was our hero for a minute, but then just where do they go? They go away and just never really hear. Look at the Wilmer Flores. I mean, for us he was a god, but now you're like, well, that's it. Where's Wilmer Flores anymore?
Yeah, we've had these guys that come up and just, man, they always say in the media that the Mets fans and the Mets organization overvalues their own prospects. And I think we have been guilty of that, because everybody this guy's the next Manny Ramirez and Wilmer Flores is a hitting machine. And look, Wilmer Flores gave us some nice moments. Yeah, the crying game, and then the hitting that home run.
A couple of walk-offs.
Yeah, love it. But that guy was not people when he left. It was
obviously, John.
No.
Obviously, you don't remember Greg Jeffries. That was our guy. He went on to have a brilliant career, and we thought.
No, I don't. I know, but I don't really remember. That's a little. It's a little.
That was
early for me.
That was one of those ones. It's supposed to be Mickey Mantle, and it just never happened.
Real quick, Queens Baseball Convention again just said in response before, Walker is the number 3 for now, Peterson 4, Carrasco comes back, he's the 2, and then Stroman is the 3. That does make sense.
Makes sense if Carrasco is Carrasco, which that's a question mark.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think it was weird that they broke up the lefties the way that they did, because they decided, okay, we'll put Peterson in the 3 and then Walker will be in between him and Lucchesi, which is fine, guess, to not have 2 lefties going back to back. But I would just rather have the 3 best pitchers go first. And to me, Walker's a better pitcher than Peterson. So it's a weird move. Anyway, we're almost out of time. I gotta go anyway. So yes,
I'm getting blinds put in.
Oh, well, listen, man, you didn't tell me you were getting blinds, but no. Before we get out of here, real quick, we've got 2 more games with the Marlins tomorrow. How do you think this shakes out? It's DeGrom and Stroman. They're skipping the 5th starter for now. So we got DeGrom on Saturday, Stroman on Sunday. We got a little bit of good luck here with the Conforto thing. How do you think it plays out?
And also, you're playing the Marlins. This should not be a team we're struggling against. You know what I mean? This shouldn't be a team we win on in a weird way in the 9th inning against. This should be a team we're beating 8-2. So yeah, I mean, I hope it's that. I hope the bats come to life. I hope it's 9-1 and 7-3. That's what I hope. And I hope that poor Jacob deGrom could pitch a great game, come out in the 7th inning and go rest and not have to worry that these guys cannot. Relief pitching, you have one job, and it's amazing to me that they can't get 3 outs. Get
I know.
3 outs.
I know, man. I totally get it. Listen, Chris, thank you so much for doing the show, giving me a little bit of your time. I really appreciate it. We had some comments, few on Instagram too, that we didn't exactly get to, but I really appreciate it. Before you go, do you have anything you want to plug? Any shows coming up? Anything like that?
Cleveland, Ohio next weekend. Hilarities in Cleveland. Yeah, my podcast Cover to Cover. We don't really talk a lot about the Mets, but if you're into, Demi Lovato, we got a podcast for you.
Chris, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, John. Good to see you, buddy.
I'll see you later.
You bet.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Chris Franjola. You heard it. Next weekend, he is going to be at Hilarities, which is a great club in Cleveland. It's actually right by where the Cleveland Indians play. So that's cool if you guys are in the area. I know people are watching this mostly probably back east in New York, but wherever you're watching it, check them out. And the podcast Cover to Cover is a lot of fun. Chris is hilarious. He's a great dude. He's been out here in the industry for a long time. He's got a lot of really funny takes on pop culture and sports and everything. So make sure you check out Cover to Cover, and you can get that on any place that you get your podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, whatever it is. This is Catching Feelings. I am John Sapanaro. I appreciate you guys watching. Thank you to Media Goon and the Queens Baseball Convention channels. Wherever you guys are tuning in, we got some comments coming in. We want to see them next time. And if you're watching this on YouTube, click subscribe, and we will see you next time. Peace.